Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this, the 2016 conference of the Keratoconus group. My name is Mike Oliver. I'm privileged to be the chair of this group, and I'd like to welcome so many of you here today. We did have worries about numbers, but it appears they weren't well founded. So thank you all for coming on what for some is probably a difficult day for travelling. Before I do anything else, I have to do the housekeeping. And you'll see that the emergency exits are cleverly marked fire and emergency exits. There, and of course the main entrance behind you. Toilets, should you need them, through those doors on my left. And we're not expecting any fire alarms. So if there is an alarm, just follow my trail of dust. And we'll all be safe, hopefully, outside. But I doubt anything is going to happen. So today's programme. The title of the conference is Looking Back and Looking Forward, which sounds a little odd at first, but the whole reason behind this conference was that it's 20 years since this group formally registered as a charity in August 1996. And we hadn't had a conference for 3 years. And usually we've had them every 2. So this seems like the appropriate time to start the cycle again. And not only is it 20 years since we registered as a charity, but it's around about 25 years since Anne founded the group as a whole. So again, it's a double whammy in terms of anniversaries, and it seemed like a good time to look back at how we started, where we've got to, what's happened in the meantime, where we are now, and what the future demands are, and also where all of you see how the group should best direct its efforts in the future. We're in the process of going through a very boring governance review and redrafting our constitution, all that unpleasant bureaucratic nonsense that you have to do. But it's very important that we focus on what people want. And you may recall, those of you who saw it or completed it, that we did do a survey of the membership, and that will feed into this process, as will the discussions at this conference. It's a slow process. It's taking us much longer than we expected, but we will get there. And we do need a plan for the future. So that's the looking forward part, as well as looking at research and other developments that are going on, and where the experts see those going, and what we all want to achieve. So, this group, a charity for 20 years, which hardly seems possible. The journey Anne will describe probably in more detail than I will, because she was there at the beginning and I wasn't. But for me, it's been a very personal journey, and in 2 or 3 sentences, and talking to people this morning, my experience is very similar to many others, I think, that I was diagnosed in 1964 and never spoke to another person with keratoconus until 1992, and that was because of this group that Anne founded. And I think many other people have a similar experience. So even just to get us to talk to each other and exchange experiences is important. But obviously we'd like to do, and are doing, much more than that, and to develop on into the future. So it's time to take stock, look at where we are, look at the future opportunities, and see where we go from here. But before I introduce today's programme, I think I'd like to thank those who are responsible for organising this conference, and that's my fellow trustees, in particular Anne and David Gable, who has been a rock in terms of his spreadsheets and making sure we did all the things we were supposed to do and didn't miss anything. So thank you especially to them, but to everyone else who's put in an effort. And I know Elaine has emptied her loft with all the merchandising, and so please do look at everything we have, and if you can, buy it and contribute. Thank you very much. But there's one person inevitably that I have to thank, and that's Anne herself. I intend to thoroughly embarrass her by saying this group simply would not exist without her. This is now the largest group of its kind, so far as I'm aware, outside the USA, and I'm not sure we don't rival the size of that one. That would not have happened without her efforts, and I think she deserves a huge vote of thanks and a round of applause for that. But not only Anne, but all the trustees there have been over the years, and all the people who weren't necessarily involved in the fabric of the organisation, but who have put in efforts to help us keep going, develop and organise our events. So thank you to all of them. And I'm really pleased to see a number of them here today, particularly those who've been with us almost since the beginning, people like Moira, who you will have seen on reception coming in, and people like Val Pearman, who is here today for the first time in many years. So welcome to all, and thank you for your efforts. More importantly, so far as today is concerned, because we were not successful in gaining any funding from any of the usual sources, we usually manage to secure awards for all or similar funding, we were not successful this time. But this event is being held in financial terms simply because of the efforts of one of our members, Amy Musto. I don't know if Amy's here today. Would you mind standing up, Amy? I'm sorry to embarrass you. But Amy persuaded her employers, Barbican Insurance, to take us on as one of their nominated charities for a period of years. Amy and her colleagues have raised huge amounts for us, and we're told there's another large tranche of funds coming. So without their support, this conference would not be happening. So we are very, very grateful. And not only that, but as I said, there is another tranche of funding we are told is coming. In his presentation today, I will ask Stephen Tuft to say a few words about a research project which we are also able to fund wholly from group funds, which is quite unusual for us anyway. And that's simply because of the work that Amy and her colleagues have done in raising enormous amounts of money. I'm told people have fallen out of planes and all sorts of other things. So I think that also deserves a very large round of applause. So having said all of that, I think we need to look at our programme today very briefly. And I will then pass on to Anne, so that you can hear a few words from our founder. Our professional speakers this morning, firstly Professor Roger Buckley, who has supported us pretty much from the outset, has been our group president, and we owe an enormous debt to him, not only for his support and advice, but also by the use of his name, giving us an enormous amount of credibility with the professionals. And so we're very grateful for that and for his continued support. Passing on, our second professional speaker is Mr. Tuft, an eminent consultant at Moorfields, who will be talking to us about research issues principally, and as I said, a research project, an offshoot of something he was already doing, which we are able to assist with as a group in terms of funding. He has also been a long-term supporter of this group and has spoken to us before, so we're very pleased to welcome him. There will, as you will see from the programme, be a number of patient speakers, and I'll leave their stories to them, and I'm sure you'll find them of interest and find points that are similar perhaps to some of your own experience. And inevitably, we can't have a Keratoconus conference without Ken Pullum. Many of you will know him, some of you won't. The only problem will be stopping Ken from talking. Sorry, Ken. And that's why we put him in the afternoon, because he is an excellent speaker, a great supporter of this group, a great supporter of the scleral lens, for which I am eternally grateful personally. And so it should be a good afternoon as well as a good morning. There will be lunch, a lengthy lunch break, and lunch will be served outside where you all come in, registered and had coffee. So you haven't come to listen to me, you've come to listen to our speakers and to Anne. So without any more ado, I will ask Anne to come up and give her a speech to you. And I have been told by the film crew, and therefore I must do it, to tell every speaker not to go too far from this lectern, because I don't think you'll be in the film otherwise. Thanks very much.
I need my reading glasses, sorry. I knew that Mike would embarrass me, so what I'd like to do briefly is to thank some of the many people who contributed to the success of the KC group from its beginnings 25 years ago, when it was just a little support group that held meetings in Moorfields, to where we are now with a mailing list of 2,500 people roughly. And I hope what I say might also encourage some of you to become involved and contribute ideas for the future, because as Mike said, the group is its members and the contributions of its members. Now, the KC group wouldn't have started when it did if I hadn't volunteered for some research being done at Moorfields on how long it took a graft to become part of the recipient's eye. I'd just had a transplant in my second eye, and so I was led from the ward, and this is in the times that some of you will remember, the luxurious times when actually when you had a transplant you stayed in the hospital for a few days. It was absolutely wonderful. Now they just chuck you out the same day. But anyway, so they led me from the ward to the bowels of Moorfields, to the research room. And over the next sort of couple of years, I can't remember how many sessions, but 5 or 6 sessions maybe, where my grafted eye was photographed. And it was a huge camera. It took up virtually the whole room. I expect it's in a museum somewhere by now. I had the graft stroked with a very thin wire to see whether I could actually feel anything, and a number of other tests I can't remember. But each session took about an hour, so I had the luxury of time to talk to the lovely man who was doing his PhD, and I was contributing to his PhD. And I could talk about how isolated I'd felt, because back then, and we're talking, what are we talking, 1988, when I had my second graft, there was no internet, there was no information anywhere. There was no information. I felt really isolated, and I felt really depressed as my vision deteriorated. I didn't know what the future held. So I was in a bad way for a while. So as I finally got to the point of having 2 eyes that I could see well with, I started talking about whether a support group for patients at Moorfields would help to stop people feeling as down and as isolated as I'd felt. And so the first people that I want to thank are some of the people that Mike's already thanked, but the people at Moorfields who supported us from the very beginning. And the first thank you is to Graham McAllister, who was doing the research, because as I say, if I hadn't been led down to his room, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to talk, and probably wouldn't have had the guts to do anything about it. Then there was Professor Geoffrey Woodward, who sadly is no longer with us, but who was, I think, head of optometry at that time. And he gave me lots of tips as to how to get things off the ground. We've already thanked Professor Roger Buckley and Ken Pullum, who will both be speaking to you. Also Dan Ehrlich, who's now head of optometry, was hugely supportive. And Lynn Speedwell, who some of you all know, who's one of the senior optometrists at Moorfields. And she wrote our first KC information booklet for us, and then has continued updating it over the years. And of course, all the many medics and optoms who've given up their time to come and talk to group meetings, whether that's in London or around the country, and have given us their support. So, as I say, the contribution of the health professionals has been huge. But the KC group has thrived above all because of the commitment of its members, the people with keratoconus and their families. So first of all, I'm going to turn the tables and say a huge thank you to Mike, because he was the only person who replied to me when, after about a year of the group's existence, I wrote to my then mailing list, which was 40 people, which I was very proud of, 40. And I asked, how people thought the KC group should develop, whether they felt it was useful and so on. And as I say, he was the only person who replied. I think he wrote 3 pages of what his ideas were, which was absolutely wonderful. So it was then Mike who ensured that we became registered as a charity. He wrote with Rosemary our first constitution. He became our first chair of trustees, which is a role he's now returned to. and he also organised our first national conferences. I'd like to say thank you too to Mark Bannister, who I hope is here today, I haven't seen him, who became our first newsletter editor and made our newsletters look professional. And then there are the members who've run the regional groups. Nasreen Fazil-Short, who started and then ran the West Midlands group in Birmingham for a number of years. She then handed over to Marion Bardry, who's here, who did sterling work there, and now we've got John Thatcher. So all these people, well, Marion and John are here today, so you'll meet them. Elizabeth Mayer is also here. She's started the group in Glasgow, and Patricia Lascelles in Leicester. So that was, their contribution has been huge. But members have contributed in all sorts of ways. We've had members who've contributed to the leaflets that you can download from our website, and we've got some of those leaflets on a table outside if anyone hasn't seen them. So several teacher members helped with the Supporting Students leaflet. Though I have to say that's actually pretty out of date now. So if there are any teachers who'd actually like to help revise that and make it a bit more useful, then just let me know. Gareth Bainan contributed to the leaflet explaining about KC to employers, and Colin Bardry, Marion's husband, wrote the leaflet about how the law can help people at work with KC. And then, of course, the real transformation was when we entered the 21st century with our first website. And that was set up for us by the then husband of one of our members. But we owe a huge thank you as well to John Smith, who subsequently took that site over and transformed it into what it is today, with a forum where people can talk to each other and various other information. I can't mention the website without paying tribute to Andrew McLean, who sadly died last year, but will be familiar to anyone who's used the forum on our website. He was a Church of Scotland minister who extended his ministry to everyone who ever posted on the forum. He shared his own KC experience, and he offered so much reassurance and wrote so many wise words on the forum, and he's hugely, hugely missed. Mike's already thanked, but I'd like to add my thanks to all the people who served on the committee over the years. Too many to name, but they all brought enthusiasm, ideas, and a willingness to give back to the KC community. And lastly, a thank you to all our many fundraisers. Our star fundraiser, Mike's already mentioned Amy, but people have run marathons for us, they've run half marathons. We had a member who cycled from Land's End to John O'Groats. A number of us walked the Thames Path and then the Capital Ring Path. We've had children of members who've organised all sorts of imaginative events at school to raise money, and other members have fundraised through work like Amy and a previous member who also made the KC group the Charity of the Year. Now, there are lots of people I haven't mentioned, but I just wanted to stress how much we owe to all our members and to illustrate the many ways that you can be part of this charity. My hope is that one day, and maybe even in my lifetime, researchers will finally crack KC, and then we can all become redundant and go home. But in the meantime, some of us are becoming a bit grey, so we always welcome members who have new ideas or want to contribute in some way. And that can be replying to a worried, newly diagnosed member on the forum, it can be starting a new regional group, or anything in between. One of the first things you can do, actually, I don't think Mike mentioned that in your conference pack there's a feedback form. So please, if you can, at the end of the day, fill that in, tell us what you thought of this conference, tell us what we should be doing in the future, what sorts of things you'd like covered in conferences. That will be extremely useful to all of us. Okay, thank you very much indeed.